Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as a citizens collective, we welcome you to another session of Wednesdays for Water. The conversation today is on Water Pollution Series 4 on gaps in the plans to tackle plastic waste. The objective of Wednesdays for Water is to engage in conversation with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, and youth to explore the complex intertwined issues associated with water and the possible solutions. It has expanded since then to have more activities like the Friday Waters and the Monday Munching with Women for Water, besides organizing water workshop, water walk and talks, seminars, special courses, and conference panels to continue the water conversation in various possible ways. Please visit our website www.w4w.in for more details. We are running a water pollution series to bring our conversation focus on the problem of plastic and other wastes in our water bodies, especially the Ganga basin. Today's session is a part of Wednesday series in collaboration with the Center for Global Affairs and Public Policy, CGAP, as a part of the project Tackling Plastic Pollution in the Ganga basin. The project aims to address the degradation of the mighty river through research expedition at several regions, youth and community outreach programs conducted all over the country, and water conversations with experts and policymakers. We have Anubhuti Shekhar, who will be moderating this session today. Anubhuti is a researcher at W4W Foundation, currently working on various topics related to women in the water sector, plastic pollution, and more. She has an urge to explore and learn about climate change and water problems in the upcoming avenues of the water governance field. She has previously worked with think tanks like CEEW and CSE in topics related to nature-based technologies, hydrometeorological disasters, and more. I would like to invite Anubhuti to continue with today's session. Over to you, Anubhuti.
Thank you so much, Prashakha, for the great start and for introducing me so well to the audience. Hello, everyone. Today, our topic of discussion is gap in the plan to tackle plastic waste. We as individuals and as society always think that the problem of plastic waste, it's more about the improper management of the plastic waste, the irresponsible consumer behavior. Well, all that is true, but there is so much more to it. And on today's session, we will be discussing all those things. India's plastic industry value chain, which is categorized in upstream and downstream sectors, the gap in the plans to tackle plastic waste production, consumption, recycle, and much more. To start, I would like to invite our first speaker, Pinky Chandran. Pinky Chandran is an independent researcher, author, and a journalist. She tracks policy and legal developments on issues related to waste management and its intersections. Garbage inspires her to write poetry, and she runs her own blog, wasteframes.com. She is a founding member of the Solid Waste Management Roundtable, SWMRP, and trustee at Hasiru Dala. She is a dog lover and a pet parent. Thank you so much, Pinky, for joining us today. We are so happy to have you on today's session. I will just hand it over to you. I will just share my screen as well. Let me know when you can see. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Would it be possible for you to run it on slideshow, please?
Yeah. Is that all right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Anubhuti, for inviting me today. I'd request you to go to the next slide. So I would like to start the presentation by showing you 3 different images. This is one photo that I'd taken in Gurgaon in 2018, and pretty much the state of affair still continues. The next picture that I had taken was in Telangana, in this place called Siddipet. Actually, this is a video. For some reason, it's not playing, but this basically shows the landfill site, the dump yard basically on fire. The third picture that I would like to show you is that in July 2023, we had plastic pellets washed up in the beaches of Mumbai. And this was a photo that I received from one of the NGOs that captured this particular incident. The next picture that I wanted to show was of my own engagement with the stormwater drains in Bangalore, and that's when I actually wrote this poem as well about this particular site of this drain, because this was on my daily commute, from work to home, and every day I would pass this particular drain in Bangalore, which was like full of plastic. So instead of water, you could actually see plastic in it. And for me was, who is to blame? Were we to basically assume that by recycling and putting out our garbage, all this would wash away with the rain? And were we really delusional in thinking that nothing is wrong? Because we have so imbibed, we are so used to seeing plastic pollution all over that it really doesn't matter, and we've taken things for granted. The next slide. So, so the question for me was, what is this particular story? We keep hearing newspaper reports. We keep seeing, we keep that there's always blame games. There's always, stories of frothing lakes. There's always stories about this whole thing about the act of cleaning and beautifying, because we always prefer aesthetically beautiful places or cities without even thinking of the consequences of where this waste is going. And if you go back to the previous three images that I showed you, it actually speaks about where our plastic waste is actually going. Next slide. So the question that I would like to ask everybody is, when you look at the waste management rules in India, are they really based on the principles of sustainable development, precaution, and polluter pay? Yes or no? And if you all think that yes, our policies, our rules, our legislations are based on these principles, then why do we continue polluting our land, air, and water? And why do we treat waste as waste, garbage, or trash, and not a resource? So this is the premise of what I'm going to be talking about today, because the very foundation of the fact is, as long as we continue using our resources as waste, that is, take, make, and dispose, we are never going to be able to solve the problem that is plaguing us today. Next slide. So if you look at the current state of affairs of what's happening, we have waste segregation, which is in our very foundation of our rules. But we also have the fact of the matter is that waste segregation is not fully enforced. Different cities have different practices, the Swachh Bharat ranking notwithstanding. We also have ineffective waste management systems. It also competes with incomplete collection systems. For instance, there are certain areas in our city which get priority, whereas there are certain pockets of the city that do not get any priority. And what's the rationale for it? There is always this inequality in terms of treatment, in terms of who lives where. Then we also have inadequate plastic waste infrastructure, and there is also unequal distribution within that existing infrastructure. I mean, when you think of infrastructure, what comes to your mind? Do you actually think these large scale MRFs, that is the material recovery facilities, that come into your mind? Or do you also look at all these small scrap shops that are actually doing this whole job of collection and then further segregating trading of this particular waste that we discard? We also have, very proudly, we also have illegal dumping, dump yards, and we practice open burning. We also have mountains that compete with the Mount Everest. Plus, there is this whole growing reliance that there is so much waste that we need to prioritize some solutions to get rid of it, and waste to energy and cement plants are the easiest solution. But the main question that we need to ask ourselves is about data. How much plastic waste are we really generating? If you go and look at the Central Pollution Control Board website, the last annual report or under plastic waste management is that of 2020-2021. So where is the data? And how are we then saying this is what we are generating? This is the amount of plastic waste that we are generating. Again, is that whole data collection scientific? Is there validation of that particular data? how are we tracking and monitoring, and how long can we continue going back to the NGT, which is the National Green Tribunal, or the Supreme Court, or the High Court for that matter, to actually put in place a system for this kind of data collection, tracking, and monitoring. Then we also have this very, very complex relationship between the center, the state, and the local governments. A classic case in point is the plastic bans. We've all heard of plastic bans, and we know that we place quite a heavy reliance on plastic bans. The fact that some of the states have been much, much more progressive than the center in terms of what has to be banned is a case in point. Then, if you're looking at stakeholders, when we talk about different kinds of policy, are we really, really mapping all the different stakeholders from the different ministries, starting at that in the first place, to people on the ground? Then we talk about, we have to recycle, we have to reuse, but there is no standards. Everything varies. It's all left on some kind of citizen initiatives, and that tends to be glorified. But the fact of the matter remains that these are always pilots, and there is no opportunity to scale because there is no enabling systems as such to have this scale up or take off. We also have limited recognition and acknowledgement of the role of informal sector, while the SWM rules and the plastic waste management rules make a mention of it. When you go reading the whole policy document, it tends to vary. Then we also have this whole problem of the problem of funding, because it's with funding, there are some places, some of them probably would be much more proactive. They might look at monetizing waste, which is again a misnomer. And then you also have this whole issue of how do they look at things in terms of allocating budgets. What do the budgets look for? Are the budgets prioritizing burning waste? Are the budgets prioritizing landfills? So those questions also arise because each city does their own thing, and the reliance always has been on landfills and waste to energy. Then you also have lack of capacity. I think if you are there was a report recently flagged. I forget the organization that came out with this report on the Central Pollution Control Board's lack of resources to even monitor things on the ground. So lack of capacity, even in understanding the problems of how plastic permeates through all our different ecosystems. So there's lack of capacity overall. And the last but the not least, but the most important thing is the lack of political will. Without political will, I think we always take comfort in the fact that we need to be. It's always good to have the status quo kind of an equation. Next slide. So coming back to what I said, when you look at the first question that I asked you, are our rules really looking at sustainable development, looking at polluter pay principle very seriously? You look at the Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016. It very clearly says that the rules have been designed to basically give more thrust on plastic waste minimization, source segregation, recycling, involving waste pickers, and it also talks about adopting polluter pay principles for the sustainability of the waste management system. If we have to pick this whole scope apart, where does it talk about minimization? It does talk about source segregation, it does talk about recycling, but again, the question remains, what do they really mean by recycling? What we have to literally decode this whole definition of recycling to say that are we looking at something that is really truly recyclable, if there is such a thing, or are we looking at something which is technically recyclable, which means you can burn it and say that you are recycling? Then this whole thing about polluter pay principle, because I think that's the crux of the matter. Who has to bear that particular responsibility? Next slide. So when you look at look at what the plastic pollution rules or even the solid waste management rules are trying to talk about is the waste management hierarchy. And if you go back to and look at what the scope is, it says waste minimization. But look at the pyramid here. When you look at the pyramid, you will know automatically that the prevention, the top of the pyramid is it's a very tiny layer of what we're looking at, both with prevention and and the biggest chunk in terms of priority goes to disposal. So while waste management hierarchy, we've probably studied this, we know about this, and we all prioritize this. um, I mean, when we look at it this way, we are actually not really looking at prevention, minimization, or even reuse. What we are looking at is energy recovery and disposal, and that continues. On the flip side, there are people proposing the zero waste management hierarchy, which means we have to look at inverting the pyramid and then pay a huge attention to rethink and redesign, followed by reducing and reusing, and then the rest. So, which means the unacceptable fraction is really really tiny. But next slide. So now that we've seen the two pyramids, what are we doing? Because we've prioritized disposal as a key pillar, we are saying, okay, let's ban, let's do cleanup drives, let's push people to recycle, let's promote some of the false solution. And I'm sure you might have heard of this, and you might have seen of this, the whole thing about the miracle called the plastic roads. I'm going to share the link to this particular article on why this is not a solution but a plastic problem. Then you have this whole videos that are going around in WhatsApp saying we can just fill our pet bottles with all our multi-layered plastic and it is going to miraculously solve the problem, because then we are building schools with it, we are building playgrounds with it, or it can be a convenient way because you don't have like a bulk to store at your place, but you can fill it all in the bottle and give it out. But the matter is, if this bottle has to be then taken it for recycling, then the waste picker will have to cut the bottle out, remove all the plastic, and which means then the waste picker is also susceptible to cuts, because the whole act of cutting that whole thing to then retrieve all these materials. So then you also have these miracle solutions like biodegradable plastic. You have this whole thing about, okay, so let's just burn all of our waste, which I think Swati will cover a little bit more around that. So all these solutions are there, but what's the problem? Next slide. What we fail to realize is that we don't look at the linkages. We have plastic and sanitary waste, but then it is addressed in one part of the policy in the solid waste management rules, but it only talks about the fact that the manufacturers of sanitary waste, of sanitary products, will then provide a cover, and the cover is normally plastic, for easy disposable. So is that a solution? uh, then when we talk about plastic in construction waste, nobody even talks about. The fact of the matter is that the use of plastic in construction waste has received little or no attention at all. Um, okay, and it has a lot of components in the this thing, right from pipes, cabling, varnishes, glues, resins. There's shrink wraps. There's so many material in construction that is used. You look at textile waste, it's nowhere addressed. Then in e-waste, again, there is nothing mentioned. Then we have these separate different streams that we are looking at, which is marine. We're looking at consolidate, and there was a there was a press release which said that they are looking at assessment of plastic waste in marine environments, and that's about it. Disaster waste management, we don't really have a concrete policy. Events, tourism, agricultural waste, or in trade. And then we make climate plans, we make livelihood plans, we make biodiversity plans, but where is whole this thing about plastic that is featured in it? So in short, what I'm trying to say is we don't really have a consolidated national institutional framework to address plastic in the true sense that we need to address it. Next slide. I think this is the last one. No.
This is the last one.
Okay. So all we are saying is that while picking up, and I'm quoting from Henry Ford, it says, while picking up and reclaiming the scrap left over after production is a public service, but planning so that there's no scrap is a higher public service. And so I'm going to leave you there because we can't really solve the plastic problem without actually going to the source of it. And I think that gives you a beautiful segue into what Swati is going to talk about. Over to you, Anubhuti, and then Swati.
Thank you so much, Pinky. I think you have very well said a lot of things, but I would like to just summarize a few points about how you talked about the interlinkage and how there are so many gaps in the policy and so many issues that are not addressed in the policy itself. It feels like plastic has been a voluntary thing that we all are doing from outside, and there is no legally binding issue that we can address or talk about. So that's the issue, I think. Is there connection problem from my side?
We can hear now.
I can hear you, Anubhuti.
Yeah. Okay. For the second part of the session, where our next speaker, Swati Shekhar, she will be talking about the upstream sector. Swati Shekhar is the Director of Programs and Team Lead Oil at Gas's Center for Financial Accountability. CFA seeks to critically analyze, document, and challenge the current developmental impact of financial institutions in India and South Asia. It also supports communities, movements, and people in India to hold financial institutions to account for any negative impacts of their operation and to support and give voice to alternative perspectives on development and the role and responsibility of finance in India. She comes with 25 years of experience of working with various civil society organizations across the country. Swati's specific area of work are on the plastic lifespan from oil and gas exploration and extraction, petrochemical production, plastic production, and consumption and waste to energy projects. I'm pretty sure a lot of us are unaware of how plastics are produced, which gas results in plastic production, and much more such questions. To answer these, I would like to hand it over to Swati to take it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anubhuti. Thanks for the invite, and thanks, Pinky, for an excellent laying out of what happens with plastics once it's used and consumed. What I like to focus on is a little bit on where plastics come from, how does plastics get made, and is the problem of plastics only a littering or end of life problem, or is there something more to it? I have a not so short presentation which I will share, and we can take it from there. The screen is visible?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah, let me just try and get this into a slideshow. And the slideshow is also visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Thanks. So, yeah, we'll a very basic conversation on where plastics come from. Often when we ask people, where plastics come from, they say a factory. And it's always a surprise to people when we say that about 99% of plastics that we are seeing today are made from fossil fuels. In India, it's mostly oil, but globally it could be oil, gas, or coal. So plastics are actually fossil fuels, and they're not just coming out of a factory from nowhere. So what are the popular narratives of plastics? And some of this will overlap with what Pinky just shared. We believe that plastics is a waste management issue. We believe that the city governments are possibly not doing enough to keep the city clean. We think it's a littering problem, and therefore it is the people who are throwing plastics out of the windows of their cars who are the issue, and all they have to do is collect the waste and segregate it and put it, and magically everything will get solved. We've already seen how from Pinky how actually that does not really help. Or we even believe that beach cleanups and Swachhata Abhiyan and the Swachh Bharat mission, and all of this will magically clean away and take away plastics and, make it disappear. The biggest line that, for example, the industry has told us is that people start pollution and people stop it. But just for a moment, I don't know the age group of people who are in the audience here, but maybe if we can just recall a time. I know in my own childhood, for example, we had milk bottles, growing up in Bombay, and every morning, every evening, night, we would keep the empty milk bottles out, and then the next morning, the RA Milk Colony people would come and replace the empty milk bottles with um, filled up milk bottles. We never I don't remember us, any one of us, telling the milk companies to please sell it to us in packets, right? So this is not something that came, a demand that came from people, that we want to do away with metal and glass, and that we want everything to somehow suddenly come in plastics. We would take a bottle from our house and take it to the store and buy oil, in those bottles. We didn't have plastic bottles and plastic sachets the way they are today. And definitely, I don't think any citizen of the country said, give it to us in plastic. So this line that people started the pollution and people can stop it is also very consciously fed to us by the industry. So just to give an example of where it all came from, so plastics are made from naphtha, which was, when oil is, for example, refined into petrol or diesel, there are certain byproducts which you have to throw. It was those byproducts, that when it was being produced in the US, when they were refining oil for petrol and diesel, they didn't know what to do with these byproducts. And of course, their R&D, the big oil companies, they did their research and development, and they realized, oh, these products are long lasting, and we can convert them into some material and sell it. So we can make money out of waste. There nowadays we are often told, how we can make money out of waste. Literally, the big oil companies made money out of their waste products when they converted naphtha and other materials into plastics. So basically, they said, we are spending a lot of money dumping this waste. Let us see what we can do with it. So this was in the early 50s, 40s, when US was making it. And then they realized that these are forever chemicals. These take years and centuries to disintegrate, if at all they do disintegrate. And it's just not going anywhere. And it was already started littering in the US. And so the industry, the big companies, they started a campaign called Keep America Beautiful in 1953. And that's where a lot of these slogans came up. 1971, people start pollution, people can stop it. 1976, clean community systems. 94, America recycles day. 99, great American cleanup. And 2018, let's talk about America. All focused on how the consumer is the cause of the problem and not the producer of the plastics. Yeah. So I just would like you, so on Earth Day 1971, the Keep America Beautiful campaign, launched this commercial, and let's take a moment to watch it. I hope you.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
So basically, this was the people can start pollution, people can stop it. That's when the line came up. And this man here, they're showing this man as a Native American, from the US. And actually, he's an Italian actor. He's not a Native American man. And what they don't tell us, so they're trying to pit people against each other. They're telling us that Native Americans have a relationship with the nature, but this man driving the car does not, and he's just throwing plastic. But again, where did the plastic come is the question. Also a question which Pinky said, uh, uh, um, is it going to be that if I manage the waste at the end, would I have solved the problem? If plastic keeps on getting produced more and more and more, where is this plastic going to go? Is it going to go into the oceans? Is it going to go into incinerators and we just burn it all up, and we're left with toxic air, which cancer causing toxic gases which are emitted out of these stacks? Where will this plastic go? So this is one of those first campaigns which was supposed to pull at the hearts of the don't litter. And of course, we see that this is basically a fraudulent one. I don't, yeah. So now just coming to this with this broad context, this point of how are plastics made, and I'll now take you all to another small video which will tell you how plastics are made. Yeah. So basically, to say that, just let me get this out of this. It'll play again. Yeah. So basically, here in this image that you will see, it's crude oil. For example, in India, we said crude oil. When crude oil is heated at different levels, you get different things. You get bitumen at the lowest. When it's less than 350 degrees centigrade. At the highest, and then petroleum right on top when it's less than 25 degrees centigrade. It's burned to get petroleum gas, gasoline, naphtha, paraffin, diesel, fuel oil, etc. Now, what we see naphtha over here, the third from the top, that is your building blocks or the base for plastics. This what we call is the building block. It could be olefin, it could be naphtha, depending on the chemistry, depending on what plastic you're making, you will have a different building block. So just to remember that next time we say plastic pollution, let's not only remember the littering that happens there, in the mountains or in the rivers or in the seas, but also let's remember Bombay High, where oil is extracted. Let's remember Badmer in Rajasthan, where oil is extracted. Let's remember Assam in where oil is extracted. Let's remember the Andaman Islands, which has now just recently started extracting oil. Now you can also see the critical the ecological nature of, for example, if you were to do it in a desert or Bombay High or an island, we are also mining for oil in extremely ecologically fragile areas. So what happens is that you have the building blocks on the left. You have naphtha, which is then converted into ethylene, propylene, benzene. These are your petrochemical building blocks, and then these are called monomers. So there's only one chemicals, there's only one cell, and then many monomers are put together and you get polymers, right? It's called polymerizing. Mono is single, poly is multiple, and then you bring all these different single molecule petrochemicals, you bring them together and you make polymers. And there are different types of polymers. You can see here polyethylene, polypropylene, polyvinyl. Now PVC we say, right? What is PVC? PVC is polyvinyl chloride. Your PET is also a polymer, right? Your plastic packets. All of these are basically polymers. But what happens is that from the monomer, you go to the polymer, and then you you have to add certain chemicals to it. The latest count is 13,000 different chemicals are used in making plastics. These chemicals are added to sometimes improve the flexibility. It could be for a color, it could be for making it rigid. So certain to add the properties that we see in plastics, right? The flexible packaging. Some chemical is added to make that plastic flexible. And so you have different types of plastics. You have 13,000 different types of chemicals. Approximately 3,500 of those chemicals are known hazardous chemicals. Some of these chemicals are also endocrine disrupting chemicals, which means that they are having very fundamental, impact on the DNA of our body. I don't know if you'll go to Amazon and purchase things. Often you will find, water bottles, and there is a plastic cap and it says BPA free. Why are they saying BPA free? BPA is a polymer, and BPA is known to cause infertility in men, right? It's known to cause infertility even in women. So this is the kind of impact these chemicals and these petrochemicals are actually having, on our lives and bodies. So one is the littering problem, but the pollution starts from the extraction of oil. In India, we only extract 15% of oil, but we are a massive petrochemical build out. Just to connect to a point that Pinky said, about how recycling is complex, or the plastic product itself is complex. This is just to tell you that if you look right on top, this is your fossil fuel, and then in the middle here you see naphtha, refinery gases. This is your refining. Then you come to ethylene, propylene, and the C4 stream. These are your monomers, and then you get to polymers. And so can you see the complex nature of these material? The plastic is a very complex material. We don't realize it when we are holding plastic in our hand. When we have this plastic thing in our hand, we don't know what is in this. I don't know what this is made up of. I don't know what chemicals have gone in. There is no transparency. There is no labeling. There's no traceability. I have no idea what goes in this, but I'm carrying it around with me wherever I am. And this is still okay. I'm not eating out of it. But a lot of our food, which is coming in plastics, the food packaging, and we can also imagine how problematic and harmful that is. So just to say that there is the upstream, midstream, and downstream. Sorry, this is not a very good image, but if you look at the top left, this is your upstream part, which is your extraction and polymerization. If you look at the right vertical blue, this is where your Pantene shampoo bottle is designed, and your FMCG company, which is a fast moving consumer goods, Unilever, Nestle, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all of these are using your plastic. So they are the FMCGs who are also gaining out of this plastic material. And finally, at the left bottom, the green part, which is when you're trying to dispose of the plastic. Now, from the government's or from the industry's messaging, we are told only about this green part. We are not told about this top orange part, and we're not told about this right blue part. We are only seeing one part of the elephant, like those six blind men and the elephant, and somebody touches the trunk, thinks it's a snake, and somebody touches the tail and thinks it's a rope. So we are only being shown this last green portion, but that's about 30% of the problem. 70% is actually hidden from us, and 70% is where the big oil companies are, and we'll quickly go to that in a minute, which is understanding the petrochemical industry. Slightly, it's just only one slide on the global situation. So right now, the biggest consumer of oil is petroleum, jet oil for airplanes, diesel and things like that. But with more and more electric vehicles, the more and more moving away from conventional forms of energy to renewable forms of energy, we are seeing oil, gas, and coal, reducing. The use of oil, gas, and coal for energy is reducing, but then Exxon Mobil and Total Energies and your Nayara and Indian Oil are not going to close down shop. They're just going to change their business. So what are they doing now? The same refineries which were producing petroleum, they have now upgraded themselves, and you will all be very unfortunately proud that we have one of the most advanced refineries in our country. 80% of our refineries actually have the capacity to just switch. Today I'm going to refine for petroleum. 1 week later I will refine for petrochemicals. So oil to energy is reducing, oil to materials is increasing, materials largely being petrochemicals. And I mean, being petrochemicals and largely from petrochemicals being polymers. In petrochemicals, there are many. There is synthetic fiber, for example, nylon, or your synthetic clothes. All that is plastics, by the way. When you're wearing a synthetic sari, you're wearing plastics. You burn it, you smell it, you will know it. Yeah, so all of this is made from fossil fuel. Increasing what we've been told by very big research agencies in the world is that 1/3 of oil demand by 2030 will be for petrochemicals, and by 2050 it's going to be 50% of oil demand will be for petrochemicals. The companies are realizing that if they only depend on petroleum, they will incur losses going forward. So they're making these integrated refineries so the profit margins can continue being very high. um, this is the current situation where 14% of crude oil and 8% of natural gas is currently being used for petrochemicals. This is going to increase to 2/3 and then 50% by the time we reach 2050, which is only 25 years away, 25, 26 years away. This slide will tell you about how the use of materials is growing. And the top line of blue is plastic. So the others, are steel and cement and other materials. But if you look at it, since 1970 till 2015, the plastic material has been growing more than any other material globally as well, and as well in India. This is slightly complex, but if you look at the left, it is oil, gas, coal. Uh, these are your fossil fuels, and if you look at the right side, it says nitrogen, fertilizers, plastics, etc., etc. Now, basically, just to say, the two big sets of polymers, petrochemicals, is one set of petrochemicals are used for fertilizers and pharma, and then for plastics. And we have to be worried extremely about the plastics. All polymers are used to make plastics. So we're seeing that plastics is the even more than fertilizers, which one can still argue maybe for food security, but plastics is the biggest gainer of the fossil fuels. Quickly coming, I have last few slides only. Quickly coming to India, we have 15 polymer manufacturers in India, and Reliance Industries Limited is the biggest producer of petrochemicals in our country. There are different types of plastic. There is LDP, HDP, low density polyethylene, high density polyethylene. These are all different things, but used for our daily life. From our Lay's chips packets to the packaging that comes in our Amazon. When we buy an Amazon fragile item, then it comes wrapped in something. All of that, all that is in our heads. Bad plastic is straws, spoons, panni, which is again a lie that has been told to us by the government, by the industry. When the plastic ban happened last year, a government person, an industry person said that the ban will address only 2% of plastic waste that is generated in this country. The big part of the plastic waste is your glucose packets and Maggie packets and the Lay's chips and all your other flexible packaging. When your refrigerator is coming packed up in plastic, your TVs are coming packed up in plastic, all of that. Now, these are big companies. And if you look at the ban that has been put on the 19 items, most of them are used by the unorganized sector. But you don't have, for example, bans on the nobody has told the Maggie producers that you can't now sell anymore, your Maggie packets. That is also single-use plastic only. We're not reusing Maggie packets, by storing something in it. We open it, tear it, take the Maggie out of it, and we throw it, right? So in our minds, we have not paid for the packet. We only paid for the food inside the packet. But it is coming to us, and that becomes now our problem, and not the problem of the company which is selling to us in those packets. So Reliance is the biggest gainer of the petrochemical industry in India, the sole producer of LDP and 42% of all commodity plastics. And the next are all government PSUs which are producing it. So 20%, so 75 to 80% of polypropylene, for example, the demand is met by Reliance, and the remaining 20% come from 4 public sector undertakings. Now I'm coming to quickly some photos for you to understand why plastic pollution doesn't begin in the dump site. Why plastic pollution doesn't begin when we are seeing a piece of plastic floating in a river. This is Dahej, this is Gujarat. This is a big petrochemical complex. It's called a PCPIR, which is petroleum, chemicals, and petrochemical investment regions. There are three in all in our country, but this is the most advanced PCPIR. This is untreated effluents that have been, that's the Arabian Sea, by the way, and untreated effluents being dumped into the Arabian Sea. Fish workers are not getting their fish catch, right? And so these fish workers are going deeper and deeper into the sea to get fish catch, which means they are sometimes caught in a cyclone in the middle of the sea. They are vulnerable to all kinds of natural calamities when they have to go into the deep sea. There are, by the way, 3 effluent treatment plants that the government has built and put it in the PCPIR, and they have told the industry, we're building and giving you infrastructure, you maintain it. Out of the 3, when we went 2 years ago, 1 was working, 2 were not working, and the industry association had no intention of repairing it. This is given to them on a platter by the government. They've built it and given. They're unwilling to or unable to maintain it. Here, this is just behind OPAL, which is a government ONGC, subsidiary company. And again, untreated effluents being dumped in. If you see in the distance, it is a small rivulet which is meeting the sea. Regularly, cows drink water from here and die. It's quite a common phenomena, right? So the agriculturalists around, the farmers around, even the people who are using cows as their source for milk are, their livelihoods are also being affected. And then you can imagine what must be happening to the soil, because this water is stagnant, is there, and it percolates into the soil. It's contaminating the soil as well. Here is another water body, again behind the same plant. Again, it is a public sector undertaking. Again, a common place where cows die over here. Here is LG Polymers in Visakhapatnam in 2020. There was a blast. There was an accident. Several people died. We remember Bhopal, right? Union Carbide. That's also petrochemicals. So we have history here. In 1980s, we had Union Carbide in Bhopal, which killed several people. We have generations being born disabled. After that, it was like a small Hiroshima, Nagasaki. But we have not learned our lesson. We are continuing to produce this. So this gas leak. There were all these people who were sick, hundreds of people were sick, 12 people even died, of this. Here is an explosion that happened in Dahej at Bharat Rasayan, where 10 people were killed. This was an accident in the factory. We were told by the villagers that actually 13 people were killed. The 3 people they didn't count were migrant laborers. They took the bodies and dumped them in the nearby forest so that they don't get pulled up for it. A lot of migrant workers work in these factories, and there is nobody watching out for them because they don't have family and support systems here. This is my final slide. This is Assam. The Assam, a couple of years ago, again this was an Assam oil exploration where there was a leak and a blast, and this fire, by the way, raged for 3 months. Entire villages had to move out. Villages were burnt. The kind of toll, and 3 months if something burns, can we imagine the kind of ash that would have settled over there, and the ash that people would have breathed in. And this is not just wood burning. This is wood burning because of toxic effluents coming out of those stacks. So this is also part of the same plastic pollution that we keep talking of. So plastic pollution, my message to all of you today is that plastic pollution doesn't start when we're throwing that plastic packet out, or when we are getting rid of our old plastic items in our house, dabbas and other things. It starts there. Every time we use plastics, let's remember somebody's paid a price. With cancer, I'm not, because there's also paucity of time, I've not spoken about the dioxins and furans, the kind of cancer that causes when it goes into a waste to energy plant, versus the kind of cancer and tuberculosis and respiratory illnesses that people have, who live around refineries. Just one example on that I'll give you and stop is that Cuddalore is a place where there's a big chemical, it's like a SEZ kind of a thing. It's like how we have these industrial development zones. And their Chemplast is there. Chemplast produces PVC, by the way. PVC is one of the dirtiest and worst kind of plastics on earth, and our water is coming in that. So let's be a little worried only. But NEERI is a government institute based in Nagpur, and they did a health study there, and they found that people in Cuddalore, living around in the zip code area are 2000 times more prone to cancer than if you were living somewhere else. So that is the kind of pollution that these chemical and petrochemical producing factories are causing. I leave you all with two questions. uh, how has this presentation influenced your understanding of plastic waste? Do you still see it as the waste in your dustbin, or is it something else? And what is a possible narrative shift that we need to make? Pinky spoke about what is the current narrative. I spoke about what is the current narrative, whether it is propagated by the industry, whether it is propagated by the government. But there is a certain narrative that is pushed onto us. But what is the kind of shift that you think we need to do so that we actually hit at the root of the problem and not just do lipa poti, and we don't just do this band-aid uh, kind of a job? Thank you again for this opportunity for speaking on something that very few people even understand or know about. And thanks for this opportunity to help demystify a very important part. Plastic, we say we are addicted to plastics, but we don't even know where it comes from and what all it does, not only to others, but even to ourselves. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Swati. I think we are at that point of time where India is progressing to be a 5 trillion economy, where India is wanting to have so much industrial growth, wanting to have petrochemical production. I would like to quote this article that I read on Scroll. As long as India aspires to be a regional petrochemical production with an eye on foreign exchange to be earned from export, we cannot truly never achieve a solution to beat plastic. As consumer, we must demand for its reduction. Thank you so much. I think it was a very insightful topic. I just have few questions. I can't see any questions on the chat box, so I will jump on my question itself. My first question to Swati is, Swati, like Pinky mentioned that how these biodegradable plastics are not a good solution. So are the biodegradable plastics same as what non-fossil fuel plastics are, which are bio-based, which are made up of sugarcane or stuff related to food materials? Are they good, like a better solution than plastics? If yes, then are there any challenges that we face in those production or consumption also?
Thanks. I think that's an important question because that's the next spin that we are being shown. But bio-based plastics, maybe they're not made out of fossil fuels, but they do have the same kind of chemicals that go into it. So it does not, just by putting the play on the word is fossil versus bio, you know, fossil versus plant based. What they're not telling us is that those chemicals are still going in there, and those hazardous chemicals are also still going in there. And therefore it is not, it doesn't not mean that it is biodegradable. And even in this there are many layers and levels of what is bio based, what is biodegradable. And because we don't, people like us, we don't know, I mean, lay people don't know the difference between bio-based plastic and biodegradable plastic. This is the kind of ignorance that the industry also utilizes. So one is that maybe it's not fossil fuel, maybe it is plant based, but the chemicals are going in there, and the same hazardous chemicals are going in there, so that does not help either us, the environment, or the planet. The second part is that I often get asked what is the alternative or replacement of plastic, and I always say nothing. Because if you want plastic, you want that flexibility, and you want the convenience, and you want the dabbas, and you want to take your plastic spoon and throw it away. After, like, you go on a train journey and then you throw away the plastic box and the spoon. Then there is no alternative for that. The alternative has to be a very fundamental system change, that we will have to move away from something single use anything. This use and throw itself is a concept that we will have to do away with if we want to save ourselves and the planet. And the reason I say this is that, suppose now, for example, you will find that sugarcane se bahut corn se bahut kuch banega. You will have lot of corn, based corn starch, etc., etc. And you now have, for example, uh, for us, we have subsistence agriculture, right? Some farmers are seeing 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres. We are small scale farmers. So they're growing grains either for their subsistence or for selling in the market and eating, and we eat that. Now, if field after field, farm after farm starts growing corn because it becomes lucrative, what happens to food security of the country? Or even I was having this argument with a friend only the other day. He said he's not from India, he's from Europe. He said, you all have banana plantations, so what about banana leaf? But I said, ki if we are such a large number of people, if we are going to just only use that banana leaf and as a use and throw, then how many banana leaves will we need? We are a large country. And I mean, we were talking in the context of Indian Railways, and the number of people who travel in Indian Railways. If those Bhelpuri walas will start giving you stuff in banana leaves, then our farms will be converted into banana plantations. What will happen to food security? So there are two aspects to this. The point is not to find a replacement to plastics. The point is to understand the unsustainable nature of our existence and work on that part of it, and then say, okay, this is avoidable plastics. Let's get that out of our lives. These plastics we need. I need my CT scan machine. The CT scan machine has plastic. The computer has plastics. Can we identify what is essential? So can we put an essentiality principle and say, okay, these are essential. So then let's make plastics of this type, of this nature, and therefore cut down our polymer production, our petrochemical production to suit the needs of the essential plastics and not look at non-essential plastics. So that is the kind of mind shift also that we will need as consumers, because there is a certain convenience. I remember when we were younger, when we would travel by train, one, we would have our hampers, and usually it would be old mithai ka dabbas. Those cardboard dabbas would be stored, and next time I went by train, my mother would put roti and sabzi in that and give it to me, and that we would maybe throw, right? But before that, we carried our steel dabbas. So I'm saying that I can see the progression in my own life. We carried steel dabbas, it went to cardboard dabbas, use and throw. Now it's plastic, use and throw. But use and throw is the problem. So systemic change is what we need. Bioplastics is not what we need. I'm sorry if I spoke too much, but yeah.
No, thank you so much, Swati. I think you have very rightly pointed out how there is no alternative. I was just reading an article few hours before, even though we all know that paper is not a good alternative because it is also in some way leading to greenhouse gas emissions, the amount of water that is used in the paper industry, all these are itself a question. So there is no better alternative to plastics. We all need to just reduce the amount of usage that we are doing. Thank you so much. My next question is, there is one question in the chat box also, which I will take it later. I will just ask from Pinky. Pinky, we often look at the current affairs, how government is planning the ban of the plastic bags. And at the end of the day, in few months, we just see how quickly it fades away and there is no better action. So we all know that banning is not an option. Banning is not the solution. So how can we educate people in a better way rather than just banning the plastic bags? Is there any better way to, because whenever we walk on the paths, we have seen a lot of landfills that they get fire, smoke. There is a lot of smoke also when landfills burn. But if we see in our own localities, there are so many sweeper bhaiyas who fire their own small waste, dump of waste. So that's an issue in itself. So how do we educate these people in a small but good manner? What's the better? Yeah.
Okay, so with plastic bans, I think the biggest problem is the lack of consistency across. So, what I mentioned in the presentation earlier was, we have states that have had plastic bans. We have the center that has now announced the plastic ban, and whereas some states, the plastic ban is much more progressive. The center has restricted itself to certain items, and they have come up with some kind of a formula to look at how they have arrived at it. But the fact of the matter is the inconsistency in terms of approach. The fact of the matter is there are too many loopholes within the plastic ban. Uh, while the Central Pollution Control Board has addressed a lot of things, like they talk about education, they talk about looking at it from an excise and customs point of view. They have looked at looking at using involving different other departments like the police for the matter and things like that. But it's all on paper. There's nothing that has come. That's nothing that has been enforceable. We took the excuse of COVID and we then hid behind it and said that, oh, now we need plastic because COVID is I mean it's we don't know what it is and we can't make sense of it, and it's safer to use plastic because then we can just use and throw, and that's about it. But then look at how it is. I am here in Karnataka. In my state, it there's a total ban on different kinds of plastic. I move to another state, then they say based on the microns, this much plastic is allowed. So then I am there. I carry that and come back to my state. There is this whole loopholes, and then how do I know that this? Now I have different books with me. So if I take this particular book, this has a particular thickness of paper. This particular book has a particular thickness of paper. It's the same with plastic. I mean, there are so many different things. So if you say 50 microns is banned, and anything above that is fine, I don't know as a consumer. I don't know how to distinguish what is banned and not banned. And the same with the retail, with the small vendors, like the ones who sell bananas and mangoes and things like that. They don't know the difference. There is no consistency in terms of awareness and education. You say you've announced the ban, there's a full page article, you might have had one radio interview, that's about it. Where is the consistency in approach? We have no idea about it. You had it in 2021 and that's about it. Zero awareness about it. Then you suddenly have a World Environment Day, and then okay, now let's do some kind of a awareness session in schools, and that's the haphazard manner in terms of lack of consistency in communication, lack of pulling up people who are not who are supposed to be responsible for curtailing that. All these things are not happening, and we will never be able to achieve it till all those loopholes are plugged. And sorry, just one more point to what Swati said about biodegradable pack is also the cause of white pollution. In the use of fertilizers and chemicals to divert that particular land which is reserved for food security to make plastic. So that's another important element which again directly connects to the whole water series that you're doing.
Right, I think you both can go on, and we'll be happy to listen, but because of time constraint, there is this question on the chat box. You mentioned that the plastic bans in past have targeted merely 2% of plastic, but how would it be possible to increase the coverage? Paradigm shift. Swati, I think that question was for you.
Yeah. So the thing is that the large part of plastics is not from the informal sector. The large part of plastics is from the formal usage of plastics by FMCG companies and others. Now, for them, there is EPR, and Pinky's already spoken about EPR and how it's such a problem that it's not. I mean, and recently we saw only 2-3 weeks ago, it kind of blew up in the face. The entire frauds that are going on around EPR is coming up, is surfacing right now. The point, there are many questions. One is, why is it that plastics used by informal sector, like your small kirana dukan, your small your small what do you call that, the eateries, when they're packing their food, etc., you put a ban on that, but you have not told Nestle that you ban the wrapping of your chocolate. Right there, they are giving them a option that you buy back the plastic, how much of a weight of plastic you put outside, you buy that much back. And what are they doing with that plastic? They're trying to make roads, or they're trying to burn it and make bricks with that toxic ash, which will get, then obviously their houses are not going to be built. It will be low cost housing, slum housing, who and poor people who will live over there. So the question is, why is there this differential treatment? Why is it that some people get are banned. Some plastics are banned, affecting some communities. But the big FMCG companies, their plastic is not banned. Now, just to give a very small example, when this ban happened last year, the government had done a very responsible thing. They announced the ban 1 year before that. At the last minute, 1 week, 10 days before the ban has to come into effect, Amul said that, our straws on our little Tetra packs, we can't replace overnight. You had a whole year, you have the money, you're making the profit, you're doing your R&D. Are you saying that you can't figure out a way, of replacing that plastic straw? You couldn't do it for a year. The government took a very strong position. They said nothing doing. Then you sell your packets without the straw, but we're not going to let you sell the straw. And they stood their course. Next week, when the Amul packets came out, they came out with paper straws. Push comes to shove, they will do it, but otherwise they will not do it. So there is no. We've also gone to a phase when there is self-regulation, because the industry does not like the word regulation. They will self-regulate, but they're also not self-regulating. No? I mean, they were trying to do that, one little extend kar do. It didn't work out. They brought their paper straws. The difference will happen, Yash, only when the government says, do reuse. You want to sell your shampoo? Go into your neighborhoods, set up kiosks, not in these big malls alone, into your neighborhoods, set up kiosks, put down your Dove and your Pantene and your all the stuff that you're using. You put down reuse over there, right? Put refill stations in various parts of the city. Now, this is something we have seen in our lifetime again. India or even Southeast Asia, we are not a use and throw society. We are a reuse and a refill society. Even today in the villages, there will be that kind of a mentality. There was decentralized distribution systems. We didn't have single malls and big departmental stores. We had neighborhood kirana dukan, right? So the more you decentralize production, the more you decentralize distribution, the more you bring in back your reuse refill, which is there in our memory, then you will actually make a big difference to the plastics, the ban and EPR. So that's the other thing. EPR, we're saying EPR in short form, we forget the meaning of EPR. EPR is extended producer responsibility. Nobody said EPR is I will put plastic, I will buy plastic. That has become equated. EPR is equal to put and buy. But extended producer responsibility, when you say those three words aloud, then you realize even refill is part of extended producer responsibility. Why don't we consider that? We are saying as a producer, you be responsible. So why can't refill systems be part of your responsibility? Why is it only buying and selling your plastic? So we are stuck in certain ways of thinking because the industry wants us to be stuck in those ways of thinking, because they don't have the intention of putting their money into, finding out other ways of being. You imagine the Clinic Plus sachets that are there all over this country. If those were not there, what kind of marketing that Clinic Plus company will have to do to put advertising? Because those sachets are all over, they don't need to do any advertising. Those sachets are free advertising. So we have to understand that you'll have to think out of the box. It's very possible we are a country which is not historically use and throw, and we can go back to those systems. Once we go back to those systems, then we would have made a big dent in this whole thing.
Right. Thank you so much, Swati. I think we have exceeded the time a little, so I will just wind it. I think thank you so much, Pinky, for the wonderful session. Both of you were great. I'm pretty sure this session could have lasted for 1 more hour with all the questions that I have. Nonetheless, I think just to summarize a little bit about the session, I think it's very important to have an effective response, and all the stakeholders have to be involved equally in this. This cannot be done just by the government or the consumers. This needs a participation of all the stakeholders. Moreover, the entire plastic life cycle, right from the extraction to the dumping, has to be taken into the consideration. The policies can't be framed like work on the marine pollution or just ban the single plastic or the microplastic. It has to be a diverse, like a broad solution that we need to work on, which starts from the production itself, right? Thank you so much. I will just hand it over to Prashakha to take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to thank our speakers, Pinky Chandran and Swati Sheshadri, for the wonderful session, and also CGAP for facilitating such enriching conversations. Thank you, Anubhuti, for moderating the session. We will continue with our water conversations towards water conservation through Wednesdays for Water, Friday Waters, and Monday Munching with Women for Water. Meanwhile, this week, we invite you to our Friday Water session on Tal Betal on December 1st. Do keep checking our social media accounts and websites, www.w4w.in for regular updates. Thanks to all. Take care of yourself. Bye.